A retired Navy SEAL lost his wife and daughter on a frozen road and spent 3 years hiding from the world. Then, during Bright Pine's worst blizzard in a decade, his loyal German Shepherd suddenly refused to let him keep driving. Out of the storm appeared a starving mother German Shepherd, shielding 3 freezing puppies with her body. Merrick rescued them, but the scars on the mother dog revealed that the cold was not the only danger they had survived. Soon, the dog reacted to the same road where Merrick's family had died, leading him toward a truth buried for 3 years. When the dog's former owner returned, Merrick was forced to choose between anger, justice, and protecting the lives now depending on him. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and please like this video and subscribe for more stories of loyalty and second chances. Bright Pine had known hard winters before, but this one arrived with the authority of something ancient. By the 3rd week of January, the northern Minnesota town had fallen beneath a cold spell no one had seen in more than a decade. Ash-Glass Lake froze from shore to shore. Snow gathered along storefront awnings in thick white shelves, and the pines surrounding the town bowed beneath layers of ice. The elementary school closed before noon. County trucks chained their tires. At the grocery store, people loaded carts with flour, canned soup, batteries, and anything that might keep a house warm if the power failed. Merrick Vale wanted no part of the nervous energy. At 55, the former Navy SEAL still carried himself with the disciplined posture of a man accustomed to entering a room already knowing where every door stood. Merrick was 6'1", broad through the shoulders and solidly built, not with the exaggerated bulk of a younger soldier, but with the controlled strength of a man who still trained because routine was easier than rest. His face was distinctly masculine, clean-shaven and angular, with a strong jaw, straight nose, and deep-set gray-blue eyes that seemed permanently touched by some distant winter. His dark hair, silvering heavily at the temples, was kept in a neat undercut. Even alone, Merrick remained almost unnaturally tidy. That afternoon he wore the same clothing he preferred through most of the cold season, a fitted long-sleeved green camouflage uniform, clean and practical, with matching trousers and dark winter boots. A stranger might have thought Merrick was still waiting for orders. The truth was that he had spent 3 years trying not to receive any. He loaded diesel, groceries, and a bottle of pain medication into his old charcoal Ford pickup, then climbed behind the wheel without speaking to anyone longer than politeness required. Beside him sat Talon. Talon was a 7-year-old male German Shepherd with a rich black and gold coat, a powerful chest, amber eyes, and the composed presence of an animal who had once worked beside armed men in places where mistakes had consequences. Silver had begun to soften the fur around Talon's muzzle, and a small notch marked the edge of his right ear. A dark brown leather collar circled his neck. Merrick had retired from the teams. Talon, in his own opinion, had retired from nothing. "You're staring," Merrick said. Talon continued watching him. The ache in Merrick's right shoulder had started that morning, deep beneath the bone. Cold weather always found the old injury. He had learned that pain could have excellent memory. Merrick started the truck. "Home." Talon accepted that answer. Lantern Ridge Cabin sat nearly 9 miles outside Bright Pine, close to the forest where county roads narrowed and mailboxes became less frequent. Merrick had chosen the place after the accident because silence came naturally there. 3 years earlier, his wife Elise and their 8-year-old daughter Nora had died on Old Lantern Road. Merrick had lived. People had called that fortunate. He had never managed to agree. Elise had been the kind of woman who made small rooms feel brighter simply by entering them. She had been 39, slender and warm-faced, with chestnut hair she usually wore loose and freckles that appeared across her nose every summer. Nora had inherited the freckles and almost none of her mother's caution. At 8, Nora had been all long limbs, untied shoelaces, missing gloves, and impossible questions. Merrick remembered every detail. That was part of the problem. The road north of town curved beneath tall lodgepole pine and white spruce. Snow swept across the asphalt in restless ribbons. Talon suddenly stood. Merrick glanced sideways. "What?" Talon's entire body had changed. The dog faced the passenger window, ears forward, neck stiff, eyes fixed on the trees. Merrick followed Talon's stare. Nothing. Only snow, only pines, only the dull blue light of an afternoon being swallowed by weather. Talon made a low sound deep in his throat, not a growl and not quite a whine. Then Talon placed one front paw against the passenger door. Merrick's hand tightened on the steering wheel. He knew that signal. Years earlier, Talon had done the same thing when something beyond immediate sight demanded attention. A hidden person, a movement, a scent that did not belong. Merrick eased off the accelerator. The truck slowed. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a dark figure moved between the trees. Merrick touched the brake. A German shepherd stepped onto the road. She was female, perhaps 5 years old, with a wheat-gold coat beneath a broad black saddle. Snow crusted the fur along her back and legs. She was painfully thin beneath the winter coat, yet her head remained high. Her copper-colored eyes caught the headlights. Behind her came 3 puppies. The first was a stocky black and gold male, no more than 8 weeks old, moving with stubborn determination despite the snow reaching nearly to his belly. The second was a sable-gray male with darker markings and oversized paws, struggling to place each foot into the tracks left ahead of him. The third was a small, pale gold female with black shading along her back, visibly weaker than the others. The mother stopped in the road. A gust tore through the trees. Snow rushed sideways. The female shepherd turned broadside. She lowered her head and pressed her body around the puppies, taking the wind against herself. Merrick stopped breathing. For one terrible second, the windshield disappeared. He saw another winter, another road. Elise bending toward Nora, an arm across a child, headlights twisting, glass becoming stars. Then nothing. The memory vanished as quickly as it came, leaving Merrick with both hands locked around the steering wheel. Talon looked at him. "Don't," Merrick whispered. He did not know whether he meant Talon, the memory, or himself. The sensible choice was simple. Contact animal control. Give the location. Go home. Someone else could handle it. Someone who had room in life for one more fragile thing. Merrick's foot moved toward the accelerator. Talon remained standing. The dog would not look away from the shepherd. Then the smallest puppy collapsed. Merrick closed his eyes. "Damn it!" He set the parking brake. Rehook. When Merrick opened the door, Talon surprised him. The German shepherd did not charge forward. Talon jumped into the snow, walked several yards toward the mother, then stopped. Slowly, deliberately, Talon lowered himself onto his belly. His ears relaxed, his head dipped. No challenge, no demand. Across the road, the exhausted mother stared at him. For a few seconds, the storm seemed to narrow around the 2 dogs. Talon turned his head and looked back at Merrick. It was not a command. Merrick knew better than to put human thoughts into an animal's eyes. But he had worked beside Talon long enough to recognize an invitation when he saw one. This was not Talon asking to chase something. This was Talon asking Merrick to come closer. And Merrick suddenly had the strange, unwelcome feeling that the dog had understood something before he had. Cold struck Merrick through the moment he stepped outside. The wind pressed his camouflage shirt against his chest and sent pain through his right shoulder. He ignored it. From behind the seat he pulled a heavy wool blanket. The mother shepherd watched every movement. Up close, Merrick could see more. Scars. One pale mark disappeared beneath the fur around her neck. Another crossed the back of her left hind leg. Smaller scars lay near one shoulder, not fresh, not accidental looking either. Merrick placed the blanket on the road. Then he backed away. He did not reach. He did not stare at the mother's eyes. Trust, he remembered, was rarely something anyone surrendered because they were ordered to. The stocky male puppy moved first. He took 2 uncertain steps toward the blanket, stopped, then looked back at his mother. The sable pup followed. The smallest female remained where she had fallen. The mother turned. She touched the little puppy with her nose. Nothing. She nudged again. The pup raised her head but could not stand. Merrick felt something hard form behind his ribs. The mother looked at him. Her copper eyes held no softness, only calculation. She glanced at Talon. Talon stayed flat against the snow. Then she looked back at Merrick. Merrick crouched several feet away. Easy. The wind stole the word. He moved slowly. One step, then another. The mother shifted her weight but did not lunge. Merrick reached the small female. She was lighter than expected when he lifted her, too light. Her fur was cold against his hands. The puppy gave one weak movement, pressing her face against the front of his uniform. Merrick almost dropped her. Nora had once fallen asleep against him exactly that way after a long drive home from Duluth, her forehead beneath his chin, one small hand folded against his chest. The memory hurt, but Merrick did not set the puppy down. He carried her to the truck. Talon rose only when Merrick reached the door. The mother shepherd followed several yards behind. Merrick laid the puppy on the rear seat and wrapped part of the blanket around her. The mother reached the truck. She inspected the door, then Merrick, then her puppy. Merrick stepped back. "You decide." The dog climbed inside. The two male puppies tried to follow. The stocky one managed the running board on his second attempt. The sable pup placed both front paws on it, slipped backward, and landed in the snow with such offended dignity that Merrick almost smiled. Almost. He lifted the pup into the cab. Within minutes, all four dogs were inside. Talon gave up his usual passenger seat. He climbed into the back and settled along the edge of the blanket, close enough to the puppies to share warmth, but far enough to give the mother space. Merrick got behind the wheel. The mother remained standing. "Suit yourself." He turned the heater higher. The truck moved. For the first mile, Merrick kept watching the rearview mirror. The mother eventually lowered herself beside the puppies. The stocky male pressed against her chest. The sable pup curled against Talon's foreleg as though they had known each other for months. The small female stayed wrapped in the blanket. Merrick needed names only because counting anonymous animals felt somehow worse. "Not mine to name," he muttered. Talon's ear moved. "Don't start." Still, Merrick found himself studying them. The strong male looked like something that would grow on the north side of a tree and refuse to move. Moss. The sable puppy's markings looked almost like old carved symbols in the shifting light. Rune. The little female had a pale warmth beneath the dark fur along her back. Poppy. Then Merrick looked at the mother. She watched him through the mirror. No name came. That felt right. Not yet. A few miles later, Merrick noticed the scars again. The neck, the rear leg, the shoulder. This was no feral dog. Someone had fed her once. Someone had trained her enough that she understood distance and restraint. Someone had probably given her a name. And somewhere between then and this road, someone had failed her. Merrick's jaw tightened. The truck approached a familiar intersection. A weathered wooden sign stood half buried beside the trees. Old Lantern Road. Merrick did not look directly at it anymore. He had trained himself not to. But the mother shepherd suddenly rose. Her ears came forward. She stepped over her puppies and stared through the rear side window toward the narrow road. Talon lifted his head. Then Talon turned the same direction. Merrick felt the muscles across his chest tighten. "No." His voice came out sharper than intended. Talon looked at him. The mother did not. Old Lantern Road disappeared between the pines, pale and empty beneath untouched snow, the place where Elise and Nora had died. Merrick kept both hands on the wheel. He drove past. He did not turn. Lantern Ridge Cabin waited less than 10 minutes away. A roof, heat, water. That was all tonight needed to be. Nothing more. But when Merrick checked the mirror again, the mother shepherd was still standing, still looking backward. Her body had gone strangely alert despite the exhaustion. Not frightened, not curious, recognizing. Merrick stared at her reflection, then at the road disappearing behind them. For the first time since stopping in the storm, he wondered whether the mother had been wandering without direction at all. Perhaps she had been trying to reach somewhere, and perhaps Old Lantern Road was not unfamiliar to her. Merrick faced forward again. Snow crossed the headlights. Talon remained awake behind him. The mother remained beside her 3 puppies, and the forest closed quietly around the truck as they continued toward Lantern Ridge Cabin. Lantern Ridge Cabin had not held this much life in years. By midnight, Merrick Vale had turned his old study into a temporary shelter. The room had once contained maps, notebooks, and a heavy oak desk where Elise used to leave coffee whenever Merrick worked too late. Now the desk had been pushed against the wall, the rug rolled away, and 3 layers of blankets covered the wooden floor near the radiator. Merrick set out shallow bowls of lukewarm water and kept the room warmer than he normally tolerated. Talon settled just outside the doorway. The 7-year-old German shepherd lay with his forelegs stretched across the threshold, black and gold coat glowing faintly in the amber hallway light. Talon was not asleep. His ears shifted at every movement from inside. Neither was Merrick. Moss had established himself as the self-appointed guardian of the litter. The 8-week-old black and gold male was the strongest of the 3 puppies. Though strong, was generous considering that his legs still seemed surprised by the existence of his paws. Each time Merrick approached, Moss stepped in front of Poppy and Rune, chest forward and expression impossibly serious. "You weigh 12 pounds, Merrick murmured. "Settle down, Lieutenant." Moss responded with a tiny growl. Rune, the sable-gray male, immediately abandoned whatever courage he possessed and peeked around his brother. Rune had curious dark eyes, oversized paws, and ears that had not yet decided whether standing upright was worth the effort. He watched Talon almost constantly. When Talon shifted his head, Rune shifted his. When Talon crossed one paw over the other, Rune attempted the same maneuver, became tangled in his own legs, and rolled sideways. Merrick almost smiled. Poppy did not notice. The pale gold female remained curled deep in the blanket, smaller than both brothers and still too quiet. That worried him. Every 20 minutes, Merrick checked her breathing. Every 30, he touched the blanket beside her to make sure the warmth was holding. He had done similar things in other places, for wounded men in rooms filled with dust, diesel fumes, and whispered commands. Those memories had rules: check breathing, control bleeding, call evacuation. This was different. There was nothing to fight, nothing to order, only a small animal breathing beneath his hand and a silence that left too much room for memory. Near 2 in the morning, Poppy stirred. Her nose emerged from the blanket. Merrick brought the shallow water dish closer. She smelled it, sneezed once, and turned her face away. Stubborn. Across the room, the mother watched him. Merrick still did not know her name. She was perhaps 5 years old, wheat gold beneath a broad black saddle, though exhaustion made her look older. Her copper eyes followed every movement. Even lying down, she kept her body curved around the puppies. Merrick noticed again how thin she was. He could feel anger beginning before he knew who deserved it. He disliked that. Anger without facts had gotten good men into bad decisions. So he waited. Shortly before dawn, Poppy drank. Only a few laps. It was enough. Merrick leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. Talon rose from the doorway and walked inside. The mother stiffened. Talon stopped. Then he lay down again, leaving several feet between them. Rune crawled across the blanket, reached Talon's front paw, and rested his head on it. Talon looked at Merrick with what seemed like profound inconvenience. "You could move." Talon did not. "Thought so." For the first time that night, Merrick slept. 43 minutes later, his phone alarm woke him. The storm had weakened enough for the county plows to begin clearing the main road. He called the only veterinarian in Bright Pine who still answered emergency calls personally. Dr. Eloan Hart arrived shortly after 9. She stepped from a dark blue utility SUV carrying 2 medical bags and wearing an olive winter jacket over a pale gray thermal sweater, dark jeans, and insulated boots. At 34, Eloan was tall and lean, with straight posture, light green eyes, and dark blonde hair braided neatly down her back. Her face was narrow and expressive, with a calmness that seemed earned rather than natural. She had grown up on a dairy farm outside Duluth and had learned young that frightened animals responded badly to people who needed to prove they were in charge. Merrick respected her for that. Eloan entered the study without walking directly toward the dogs. She sat on the floor. "Good morning," she said. Moss growled. Eloan looked at him. "Very convincing." Rune stared at her medical bag. Poppy remained under the blanket. The mother stood. Eloan did not reach. "Give her a minute." Merrick folded his arms. "She has had several." "She didn't invite me." That sounded irritatingly reasonable. Talon entered from the hallway and sat beside Merrick. The mother glanced at him. Her shoulders lowered slightly. Eloan noticed. "So Talon has clearance." "Apparently. Useful reference." She extended the back of one hand. The mother took 2 slow steps forward and sniffed. Only then did Elowen begin. Poppy came first. Her temperature was low but improving. Her gums had better color than the night before, and her heartbeat was steady. "Mild hypothermia," Elowen said. "You warmed her gradually. Good." Merrick looked away. He did not need praise for not letting something freeze to death. Rune had a superficial scrape along one paw, probably from ice or debris beneath the snow. Moss was underweight, but otherwise surprisingly healthy. "He's going to be trouble," Elowen said. Moss had attached himself to one of her shoelaces. "Already is." Then Elowen examined the mother. The atmosphere changed. She ran careful hands along the dog's ribs, spine, shoulders, and hips. "Too thin." Merrick nodded. Elowen parted the fur around the neck. A pale band of damaged skin circled part of it. Older scars ran across one shoulder and the back of the left hind leg. Nothing was fresh. That somehow made Merrick angrier. Fresh injuries belonged to a moment. Old injuries suggested a pattern. Elowen remained clinical. Some of this could come from working outdoors. Some could come from fencing or accidents. The neck is more concerning. Why? Repeated pressure, a collar worn too tight, or restraint over a long period. Merrick looked at the mother. She met his eyes. No accusation, no request for pity, only vigilance. Scars, Merrick thought, were more honest than people. They never explained themselves. They merely proved that something had happened. Rehook Elowen reached for the microchip scanner. The handheld device passed over the dog's shoulders once. Nothing. Again. A sharp electronic beep broke the quiet. The mother flinched. Talon stood immediately. And then something unexpected happened. The mother did not retreat toward her puppies. Instead, she stepped toward Talon and pressed one shoulder briefly against his chest. It lasted less than a second. Talon did not move. Merrick watched them. 2 working dogs. 2 histories no one in the room fully understood. The scanner beeped again. Elowen stared at the number appearing on the small screen. Her expression changed. Not alarm, recognition. "That's not a private breeder registry." Merrick straightened. "What is it?" Elowen looked toward the mother. "Let me check." For the first time since the dogs entered his life, Merrick felt that the question was no longer simply who had failed them. It was who this dog had been before anyone failed her at all. The registration database loaded slowly through the cabin's weak internet connection. Elowen entered the chip number twice to make sure there was no transcription error. A record appeared. North Star Working Dog Initiative. Status: inactive. Merrick read the words over Elowen's shoulder. "Search and rescue?" "Looks like it." There were only fragments. The organization had operated in northern Minnesota and trained dogs for wilderness search work. The registration was several years old. The transfer history stopped abruptly. There was no current owner listed, no Beckett Rusk, no complete release form. Elowen leaned back. "This helps identify her. It does not establish current ownership." "So someone can still show up and claim her." "Someone can claim anything, proving it is different." The mother lay beside her puppies while they spoke. For the moment, Merrick decided to call her nothing. A name felt like possession. He had seen enough of that already. By late morning, Elowen had finished treatment instructions and helped Merrick rearrange the room. Poppy needed warmth and observation. Rune's paw needed to stay clean. All 3 puppies needed small meals rather than one large feeding. The mother required rest, hydration, and more calories slowly. Then Talon began staring at the back door. Again. Merrick ignored him at first. Talon walked to the door, sat, looked back. The mother raised her head. A moment later she stood. "Absolutely not." Talon remained seated. Merrick knew the look. Elowen zipped her medical bag. "I think you're losing the vote." "There is no vote." Talon scratched the door once. Merrick muttered something unsuitable for polite company and pulled on his boots. He clipped a long lead to Talon's collar. For the mother, he used another lead loosely, careful not to put pressure around the damaged skin of her neck. The puppies remained inside with Elowen. Talon took the trail behind the cabin. The mother followed. Merrick expected them to circle the property. They did not. The old trail angled west through pines heavy with snow. Merrick knew where it eventually went. His stomach tightened. Old Lantern Road lay less than half a mile beyond the ridge. He almost turned back. Then he noticed the mother. Her behavior had changed. The exhaustion remained, but hesitation had disappeared. She was not wandering, she was navigating. The trail ended near a neglected clearing Merrick had passed dozens of times without noticing. Snow buried most of it. A rotting wooden shelter leaned beneath the trees. Several upright posts formed what might once have been training lanes. An old platform sat crooked beneath a drift. The mother moved ahead. She sniffed one post, then another. Talon followed, studying the same ground. Merrick wiped snow from a rectangular metal sign bolted to a tree. Faded blue paint appeared beneath his glove. 2 words remained readable: North Star. He stared. So this was where she knew the road from. Not prophecy, not coincidence woven into some supernatural design. Memory, training, perhaps safety. The mother stood inside the ruined shelter. For the first time, Merrick saw her tail move slightly. Not happiness, recognition. Something had once happened here that had not frightened her. That mattered. Near the corner of the shelter, Talon nosed a loose board. Merrick lifted it. An old training collar lay beneath, stiff with age and dirt. No hidden documents, no secret message. Only faded nylon and a cracked plastic buckle. Enough to prove the place had been used for dogs. Merrick carried it back. When they reached Lantern Ridge Cabin, Elowen was standing at the front window. "There's someone here." A pickup Merrick did not recognize sat in the drive. Its driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He was about 45, thick around the waist and shoulders, with a ruddy face worn by cold and alcohol. Sandy brown hair pushed flat beneath a knit cap and uneven stubble along a broad jaw. His brown work coat had been patched at one elbow, and his boots were stained with road salt and old mud. There was something restless about him. Not aggressive yet, but accustomed to entering situations already prepared to be offended. The man looked past Merrick. His eyes found the mother. Greta. The dog stopped, then backed away. Talon moved forward, not attacking, just present. The man pointed. "That's my dog." Merrick stood between him and the porch. "Name?" "Beckett Rusk." "How do you know she's here?" "People talk." Beckett looked toward the cabin. "And there should be 3 pups." "There are." "I'm taking them." Merrick's expression did not change. "Show me ownership." Beckett gave a short laugh. "They're dogs." "Then this should be easy." The humor vanished. Beckett pulled out his phone and showed Merrick several photographs. The same shepherd appeared beside a warehouse fence. In another picture, she lay near a battered plastic kennel. Then Beckett produced a folded handwritten receipt. No chip number, no veterinary record, no unique markings. Elowen stepped onto the porch. "The dog has a registered microchip with incomplete transfer history. Until ownership is verified, moving her would be irresponsible." Beckett's jaw tightened. "I've fed that dog." Merrick looked at Luma's ribs. The silence answered for him. Beckett noticed. "Winter's been bad." "Apparently." "You calling me a liar?" "No, I'm asking for documents." Merrick called Deputy Mara Bellamy. He explained only what he knew. A woman's firm voice answered through the phone and instructed both parties to leave the dogs where they were until the sheriff's office could review the claim. Beckett heard enough. His face reddened, but he knew arguing with a deputy over the phone would accomplish nothing. "Fine." He backed toward his truck. "You'll hear from me." Then his gaze shifted. Merrick was still holding the old North Star training collar. Beckett froze, only for a heartbeat. But the change was unmistakable. His anger disappeared. Something colder replaced it. Fear or worry. Then Beckett looked away. He climbed into his pickup and left. Merrick remained in the yard long after the taillights disappeared. Talon stood beside him. The mother stood near the porch. Merrick looked down at the faded collar in his hand. He had learned long ago that people could control words. Faces were harder. Whatever North Star meant to Beckett Rusk, it meant more than an abandoned training field. And Beckett had not expected Merrick to find it. By the following morning, Lantern Ridge Cabin had begun to resemble 2 different lives awkwardly occupying the same structure. One belonged to Merrick Vale. That life was orderly, quiet, and deliberately spare. Boots stood aligned beside the mudroom door. Firewood was stacked by length. Groceries were labeled and arranged according to use. Nothing sat on a table without a reason. The other life had arrived 4 paws at a time. A towel lay under the kitchen table because Rune had discovered that water bowls could be stepped in. Poppy had somehow claimed one corner near the wood stove. Moss had begun carrying pieces of kindling from the basket and depositing them beneath a chair with the seriousness of a man reinforcing a defensive position. Merrick had stopped moving the kindling back. That bothered him more than it should have. At 9:15, a sheriff's SUV rolled into the drive. Deputy Mara Bellamy stepped out carrying a leather folder beneath one arm. Mara was 37, tall enough to look Merrick nearly level in the eye, with a lean, athletic build and the upright posture of someone who disliked wasted motion. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a low, practical knot beneath a winter cap. High cheekbones gave her face a stern quality until she spoke, when a faint warmth softened the lines around her brown eyes. Her winter duty jacket was dark navy, clean despite the slush, with the Bright Pine County insignia stitched over one shoulder. Mara had grown up in Bright Pine. She had known Elise, not closely enough to call herself family, but enough to remember Elise volunteering at the school book drive and enough to know better than to speak her name casually around Merrick. Mara entered the cabin, looked down as Rune trotted toward one boot, and raised an eyebrow. "This place looks compromised." "Temporary occupation." Rune bit her shoelace. Mara looked at Merrick. "Very temporary." Merrick lifted Rune away. Moss observed from beneath the table, clearly judging the handling procedure. Mara placed the folder on the counter. "I opened a temporary welfare file." Merrick's mouth tightened. He had expected it. That did not mean he liked it. "I need a written timeline. When you found them. Weather conditions. Where. Their condition when they arrived. Everything Beckett said yesterday. Exact wording if you remember it." "I remember it." "Write it anyway." Merrick stared at the folder. Mara stared back. For a moment, the kitchen became absurdly similar to briefings Merrick had endured 20 years earlier. Paperwork had always felt like the bureaucratic shadow of action. Then he remembered how often shadows became evidence after everyone else had forgotten what happened. He opened the folder. Mara gave him a pen. "Welcome back to civilization." "I preferred the snow." "I believe you." Talon remained beside the doorway, amber eyes moving between them. Luma lay with the puppies nearby. Merrick had learned her name only that morning. Elowen had called before Mara arrived. She had continued searching the old microchip registry and found an archived intake entry attached to the chip number. Luma. The name had belonged to her before anyone called her Greta. Merrick had repeated it once. The German shepherd had lifted her head immediately. That was enough. Elowen's second discovery was more useful. An old staff name appeared in several archived North Star records. Harriet Sloan. By noon, Mara had located an address. Harriet lived in a small cedar-sided house 8 miles east of Bright Pine, near the edge of a frozen marsh. Merrick left the puppies at Lantern Ridge Cabin with Elowen, who arrived carrying medical supplies and enough dry humor to make clear that she had not planned on spending her day babysitting 3 miniature disasters. Talon remained with Merrick. Luma came too. Mara drove. Harriet Sloan answered the door before they knocked. At 63, Harriet was small but wiry, with a straight-backed stance that made her seem taller than she was. Her silver hair was cut short around a weather-lined face, and pale blue-gray eyes sat beneath brows that seemed permanently prepared for skepticism. She wore a brown wool coat over a dark green turtleneck and heavy winter trousers tucked into practical snow boots. Harriet had the weathered hands of someone who had spent more time holding leashes, ropes, and fence wire than pens. She studied Mara first, then Merrick, then Talon. When she saw Luma, her expression changed. The old woman did not gasp. She did not rush forward. Harriet simply stopped moving. "Luma." The shepherd's ears rose. Harriet's hand came slowly to her mouth. "Well," she whispered, "look at you." Luma did not run toward her, but she stepped closer. Harriet crouched. "Still making people earn it?" Luma approached until her nose touched Harriet's sleeve. For several seconds, No one spoke. Harriet finally stood and wiped one eye with the side of her thumb as though irritated by the wind. "Come inside before I embarrass myself further." Her home smelled of cedar, coffee, and old dogs. Framed photographs covered one wall. Search teams in orange jackets, handlers kneeling beside shepherds, retrievers, and border collies. Snow, mud, floodwater, people being found. Harriet poured coffee while Mara explained why they were there. When Beckett Rusk's name came up, Harriet frowned. "Never heard of him." She looked at Luma. "But I know her." Harriet explained that North Star Working Dog Initiative had begun as a small nonprofit focused on wilderness search support. They worked with county rescue teams, volunteer fire departments, and parks throughout northern Minnesota. Luma had entered training young. "Fast?" Merrick asked. Harriet smiled. "No." Merrick glanced at the dog. "Motivated?" "More than anyone wanted." Harriet leaned back in her chair. Luma was never the first dog across the field. She was the one still working when everyone else decided the field was empty. That description stayed with Merrick. Harriet explained that Luma's greatest strength had been spatial memory. Once she learned a route, shelter, creek crossing, training station, or scent corridor, she remembered it with remarkable consistency. "That clearing near Old Lantern Road," Mara said. "Was it yours?" Harriet nodded. "Small winter station. We used it to train navigation through timber and blowing snow." Merrick looked toward Luma. There was the answer. No impossible instinct. No supernatural pull. The dog had run through a blizzard toward somewhere that once meant shelter, handlers, food, and safety. Harriet seemed to understand what he was thinking. "People like making dogs mystical," she said. "Makes for better stories." Talon looked at her. Harriet pointed at him. "No offense." Talon blinked. Harriet continued. "Most of what looks like magic is memory, smell, repetition, and noticing things we don't." Merrick watched Luma resting beneath the table. For some reason, that explanation felt more beautiful than magic. Rehook. Harriet brought down an old photograph album. She turned several pages. Then Luma stood. The shepherd crossed the room without hesitation and stopped beside Harriet's chair. Harriet froze on one particular photograph. A younger Luma stood in deep snow beside a blue wooden marker. Behind the dog stretched a familiar bend in Old Lantern Road. Merrick leaned closer. Luma lowered her nose to the photograph. Then she touched the image once. Harriet's expression softened. She remembered that station. Merrick looked from the photograph to the dog. 3 years had passed. Handlers had disappeared. Buildings had decayed. Names had changed. Yet somewhere inside Luma, the map had remained. Merrick found himself thinking of memory differently. Perhaps remembering was not always the thing that trapped you. Sometimes it was the thing that showed you where safety used to be, and where it might exist again. Harriet told them North Star had collapsed after its founder, Walter Sloan, Harriet's older brother, died unexpectedly from a heart condition. Funding had already been thin. Without Walter, donors disappeared, the training lease ended, and the remaining dogs were transferred quickly. Too quickly, Harriet admitted. Luma had gone to Calvin Marek. Calvin had been 58 then, a quiet former forestry worker living outside Bright Pine. Harriet described Calvin as tall, narrow-shouldered, with a long gray beard and the habit of speaking to dogs before people. A logging accident in his 40s had damaged one leg, ending his field work and leaving him with a limp. He wasn't a trainer, Harriet said, but he understood working dogs. Luma liked him. "What happened?" Mara asked. "Cancer." Harriet's voice flattened. "About 16 months ago." The transfer paperwork after Calvin's death was unclear. North Star no longer existed to reclaim Luma. Calvin had no immediate family in Minnesota. Mara made 2 calls from the porch. By the time they left, she had confirmed that Beckett Rusk had worked briefly for Calvin, mostly handling repairs and hauling equipment during Calvin's final year. Beckett had also continued using a warehouse property nearby after Calvin died. That did not establish ownership, but it explained the photographs, and perhaps how Luma ended up with him. Back at Lantern Ridge Cabin, Merrick set the old North Star training collar on a shelf. Talon immediately walked over. He smelled the nylon carefully. Then he looked at Merrick. "You're not finding ghosts." Talon continued staring. Merrick knew what the dog was doing. Old fabric held old scents. Wood, animals, people, storage. Talon's training told him the object belonged to a trail of information, even if the trail itself had faded beyond use. Merrick rubbed Talon behind one ear. "Memory, that's all." Talon seemed unconvinced by Merrick's need to explain it. Harriet called later that afternoon. She had remembered something. North Star once kept maps, training cameras, GPS units, and archived field logs in a storage building north of the old winter station. The building had been abandoned during the shutdown. Harriet had no idea what remained. Mara decided they would verify ownership of the property and inspect it properly. Not that evening. Not without authorization. Merrick agreed. Mostly. Life continued moving through the cabin while the investigation moved more slowly. Rune followed Talon everywhere. If Talon sat at the front door, Rune sat behind him. If Talon walked to the water bowl, Rune followed. If Talon stretched, Rune attempted a stretch and usually tipped sideways. Poppy discovered Merrick's old field jacket beside the stove and turned it into a bed. Merrick considered moving her. He did not. Moss stopped stepping between Merrick and the others. One evening, Merrick took the dogs into the yard for a few minutes. Talon stepped neatly over a fallen log. Rune watched. Rune backed up. Merrick saw the intention forming too late. "No!" Rune charged. The puppy struck the log with both front paws, achieved perhaps 2 inches of altitude, and landed flat on his belly on the other side. Silence. Rune stood. He shook himself. Then he looked at Talon as though Talon had provided poor instructions. Merrick laughed. Actually laughed. The sound came from somewhere unfamiliar. Talon turned. Luma looked up. Even Merrick seemed startled by it. For a few seconds, the cabin yard did not feel like the place he had gone to disappear. It simply felt like home. That night, Talon woke him shortly after 2. No barking. The dog stood beside the bedroom door, body rigid. Merrick rose immediately. He checked the security camera feed. A dark figure crossed beyond the rear fence, then vanished. Merrick did not go outside. By morning, Mara was there. They found boot prints near the fence and fresh scraping around one gate latch. No clear tire tracks, no face on camera, no proof. Merrick stared into the trees. "I can follow the tracks." "No." Mara's answer was immediate. "They came onto my property. And they left." "You want me to ignore that?" "I want you to document it." Mara pointed toward the camera. "Save the footage, write the time, photograph the prints. If a vehicle appears, get the plate if you safely can." Merrick's jaw tightened. Mara stepped closer. "You were trained to act when action mattered. This is one of the times restraint matters more." Merrick disliked that she was right. He nodded. Later that afternoon, Mara called. Her voice had changed. Not alarmed. Focused. She had been checking Beckett's employment history. For several years, Beckett had worked intermittently as a driver's assistant for a hauling contractor. The owner was Coulter Dane. Dane Timber and Hauling had moved lumber and equipment throughout the region. And old county transportation records showed something else. The company had used Old Lantern Road regularly. Merrick stood at the kitchen window while Mara spoke. Outside, Talon and Luma watched the forest together. For the first time, the old road no longer felt like a place Merrick alone remembered. Other people had histories there too. And some of them, perhaps, had reasons for wanting those histories left beneath the snow. The permission came through 2 mornings later. The old North Star storage building sat on private timberland north of Old Lantern Road, and the land manager had agreed to let Deputy Mara Bellamy inspect the structure with Harriet Sloan present as a former program representative. Merrick went because Mara asked him to. That was the official reason. The real one was harder to admit. For 3 years, Old Lantern Road had existed in his mind as a sealed room. He had known where the door was, known what waited behind it, and chosen not to open it. Now a dog had remembered the road, and memory, once disturbed, rarely returned obediently to sleep. The morning was bright enough to hurt the eyes. Sunlight scattered across the snow in hard white flashes, while the temperature remained well below freezing. Pines rose on either side of the access road, their branches sagging beneath powder. Harriet rode with Mara. Merrick followed in his pickup with Talon beside him. Luma remained at Lantern Ridge Cabin with Eloan and the puppies. The storage building appeared after half a mile of unplowed track. It was smaller than Merrick expected. A low rectangular structure with weathered cedar siding, 2 narrow windows, and a roof bowed slightly beneath years of snow. The faded North Star emblem still clung to one wall, a blue compass star missing nearly half its paint. Harriet stood in front of it for several seconds. "Used to be loud here," she said. Mara unlocked the door with a key provided by the land manager. "What kind of loud?" "Dogs, radios, people arguing about coffee." Harriet smiled faintly. Walter believed coffee counted as emergency equipment. Merrick remembered Harriet's brother only through her stories. Walter Sloan had built North Star around the idea that trained dogs and ordinary volunteers could save people in country too large for technology alone. His death had ended more than a program. It had scattered the people and animals that depended on it. The door opened with a dry wooden groan. Dust moved through a shaft of pale light. The storage room was almost empty. Metal shelving lined 2 walls. Old hooks hung bare. A torn tarp covered a broken folding table. Rodents had chewed through one cardboard box, leaving shredded paper across the floor. Merrick felt something strangely close to relief. No hidden wall of evidence. No miraculous file with every answer typed neatly inside. Reality looked more like this, mostly missing pieces. Harriet walked slowly through the room. They cleared the expensive equipment first. She touched an empty shelf. Radios, GPS collars, medical packs. Mara photographed the interior before anyone moved anything. Merrick watched her work. "Still think I hate paperwork?" Mara glanced over. "I never doubted it." Harriet found the metal cabinet behind a stack of collapsed plastic crates. It was waist-high, dented at one corner, and rusted along the base. The top drawer was empty. The second held training cones, spare buckles, old batteries, and laminated map cards. The bottom drawer jammed halfway. Merrick crouched and looked at it. "May I?" Mara nodded. He worked the drawer carefully instead of forcing it. The rail released with a scrape. Inside were 3 plastic document boxes. Harriet exhaled. "I forgot these." The boxes held maintenance logs, route maps, inventory lists, and binders recording training locations. Nothing dramatic. But unlike memories, records did not need drama to matter. Harriet opened a maintenance binder. A hand-drawn grid identified equipment numbers and deployment points. One line made her stop. Camera Unit NS-14, Old Lantern Road, East Bend. Mara leaned closer. "Permanent camera?" "Training camera," Harriet said. "Motion activated. We use them to review handler approach and dog search patterns." Merrick's eyes stayed on the location. East Bend. He knew the bend. Everyone involved in the accident knew it. "Where's the camera?" Harriet searched the equipment retirement sheets. "Not here." Another page showed the unit marked as removed during shutdown. Beside it was a note. "Video archived weekly. Office Workstation B." Harriet rubbed her forehead. "The field cameras didn't keep much storage. We copied everything onto the office system." Mara asked, "What happened to the computer?" "Office was emptied after the lease ended." Harriet looked through another file. "Wait." She pulled free a yellow inventory sheet. "Some drives went to Coldwater data storage in Ely. We couldn't decide what to destroy because several training incidents were still attached to insurance files." Mara photographed the sheet. Merrick said nothing. His pulse had begun to beat too hard. The room suddenly felt smaller. Harriet noticed. "Merrick." "I'm fine." It was the automatic answer of a man who had spent decades using it to end conversations. Mara did not challenge him. She only said, "We request it properly." He looked at her. "No shortcuts." "No shortcuts." Merrick nodded. That was somehow worse. Shortcuts ended quickly. Waiting gave the mind time to invent endings. 3 days passed. The puppies improved. Poppy began eating with enough enthusiasm to make Eloan revise her opinion of the dog's fragility. Rune discovered that the hallway runner could be pulled sideways if he bit the corner and walked backward. Moss learned that Merrick's boots were excellent places to sleep. Life kept happening while Merrick waited for a storage company to answer a records request. That offended him. The world had once ended on a winter road, yet laundry still needed folding, dogs still needed feeding, the wood stove still required ash to be emptied. On the fourth afternoon, Mara called. They found the archive. Merrick did not answer immediately. How much? Too much. Several drives had been partially corrupted. Dates were inconsistent. Old software formats complicated playback. A technician extracted what could still be read. Mara came to Lantern Ridge Cabin that evening carrying a sealed evidence drive and a county laptop. Harriet joined by video call. Talon lay beside Merrick's chair. The first folders contained nothing useful. Handlers walking grid patterns. Dogs locating volunteers beneath tarps. Empty roads. Snowfall. A fox passing a camera at 2 in the morning. Hours collapsed into fragments. Merrick nearly told Mara to stop. Then a timestamp appeared. The date matched. His breathing changed before his mind fully accepted it. Mara noticed. "Do you want a minute?" "No." The clip began. Old Lantern Road appeared beneath falling snow. The image was grainy and colorless in low light. For 7 seconds, nothing moved. Then headlights entered frame. A truck passed. Large. Commercial. On the door, barely visible beneath road grime, was a faded logo. Dane Timber and Hauling. Merrick went completely still. The timestamp was less than 40 minutes before the accident. Mara paused the video. No one spoke. The room held only the stove ticking and the quiet breathing of dogs. "This does not show the accident," Mara said carefully. "I know. It does not show who was driving. I know. It proves a company vehicle was on that road." Merrick stared at the frozen frame. "And Coulter said none were." Mara nodded. During the original accident investigation, Dane Timber and Hauling had been one of several regional companies asked whether vehicles had been operating nearby because a witness had reported seeing truck lights earlier that night. The response from Coulter Dane had been simple. No company vehicle had used Old Lantern Road. Mara copied the relevant report onto the screen. Merrick read the statement twice. The lie was small on paper. 1 sentence. 3 years of silence built around it. Mara closed the laptop. "I'm transferring this to the sheriff and the investigator who handled the original file." Merrick stood. His chair scraped backward. Talon rose. "I need air." He walked into the hallway before anyone could answer. Rehook halfway to the back door, Merrick heard a sound. Not from the laptop. Not from Mara. A child laughing. For one impossible instant, every muscle in his body locked. Then the sound came again. High, bright, familiar enough to break him. Merrick turned sharply. Rune stood in the hallway with one of Nora's old wind-up toys between his paws. A small wooden bird. Merrick had forgotten it existed. Rune had apparently found it beneath a low cabinet and activated the mechanism by biting the side. The toy gave a thin musical chirp followed by a recorded little laugh. Nora's laugh. Merrick could not move. The room blurred. Rune looked up at him, ears uneven, completely unaware that he had opened a door buried 3 years deep. Talon approached quietly. Merrick crouched. He picked up the toy. His hand shook. For years, Merrick had avoided boxes, photographs, recordings, anything that might make Elise and Nora suddenly present again. Now Nora's laugh had escaped from beneath a cabinet because a puppy had chewed the wrong object. Merrick pressed the wooden bird against his palm. The pain came, but something else came with it. Warmth. He had forgotten that memory could carry both. That night, sleep did not come. Headlights returned every time Merrick closed his eyes. Snow crossing glass, the sudden turn of the steering wheel, metal folding, Nora calling from the back seat. Then silence. His right shoulder began aching so badly that he finally took the medication he had been avoiding. He sat on the edge of the bed until dawn. By afternoon he had convinced himself of something dangerous. He did not want to know more. Knowing would not bring Elise back. It would not return Nora. The past had already taken enough. Merrick walked into the detached workshop behind the cabin and shut the door. He sat on an old bench beneath tools his father had once owned. For a while, no one followed. Then the door moved. Talon entered. The German shepherd crossed the room and lay beside Merrick's boots. Merrick did not touch him. "You're bad at respecting privacy." Talon lowered his head. Several minutes later, the door nudged open again. Rune appeared carrying one of Merrick's socks. He walked proudly into the workshop, dropped the sock at Merrick's feet, and sat. Poppy came behind him. She curled against Talon's side. Moss stood in the doorway, considering whether participation compromised his dignity. Eventually, he entered too. Last came Luma. The 5-year-old shepherd stopped several feet away. Merrick expected her to leave. Instead, she lowered herself onto the floor. That was all. No miraculous gesture. No perfect animal wisdom. 5 dogs simply chose the same quiet room. Merrick looked at them. For 3 years, he had treated grief like a sentence, as though suffering long enough proved the depth of love, as though living well afterward would somehow betray the dead. He looked at Nora's toy on the shelf beside him. Maybe remembering her did not require punishment. The realization did not heal anything, but it made breathing easier. 2 days later, pressure arrived from the outside world. Beckett Rusk filed a formal claim demanding return of Luma and the puppies. His paperwork still lacked a clear transfer chain, but the claim forced county review. Coulter Dane submitted a written statement denying any involvement with the dogs and describing Beckett as an occasional former worker acting independently. Mara called it what it was: distance. That evening, Talon froze near the rear fence. Merrick saw him before he saw the object. A small package of food lay just inside the property line. Talon would not approach it. Merrick remembered Mara's instructions. He did not touch it. He called. Mara arrived with evidence bags and gloves. Eloan later examined a sample and confirmed that it contained a substance unsafe for dogs. No one speculated publicly about who had thrown it. The security camera showed a vehicle passing slowly along the county road shortly before the object appeared. Dark body, no readable plate, no identifiable driver. Merrick watched the recording 3 times. "I can find out who owns that vehicle." Mara shook her head. "No. They came near my property." "And if you confront the wrong person?" Merrick said nothing. Mara stepped closer. "If you want to protect these dogs, don't give anyone the chance to turn you into the bigger problem." His jaw tightened. Everything in him hated waiting. He had spent much of his adult life learning how to close distance, identify threats, and act before danger grew. This demanded the opposite: document, preserve, wait, trust other people to do their jobs. Merrick looked toward the house. Through the window, Talon sat beside Luma. Rune climbed over both of them. Poppy slept nearby. Moss guarded absolutely nothing. Merrick exhaled. "All right." Mara nodded. For once, victory would not belong to the man who moved first. It would belong to the one disciplined enough not to. The second storm arrived after sunset. By 8 o'clock, Bright Pine had disappeared behind a moving wall of snow. Wind dragged powder across Lantern Ridge in long white sheets, erasing tire tracks almost as quickly as they formed. The pines groaned beneath fresh weight, and every few minutes loose snow struck the cabin windows with a sound like handfuls of gravel. Merrick Vale stood at the kitchen counter checking the locks. Not because he expected them to fail, because checking things gave his hands somewhere to put the tension. The house had changed since Luma and the puppies arrived. Blankets occupied corners that had once been empty. Bowls sat beneath the mudroom bench. Talon no longer had the privilege of owning every quiet place in the building. Rune had claimed the space beneath the kitchen chair. Poppy was asleep against Luma's foreleg. Moss lay closer to the door, though he was beginning to understand that guarding the entire household was probably beyond the responsibilities of an 8-week-old puppy. Mara called shortly after 8:30. "Stay on the property unless something makes that impossible." Merrick leaned one hip against the counter. "You always make requests sound like orders." "They work better that way." Her voice remained steady, but Merrick heard the fatigue beneath it. The sheriff's office was still reviewing the recovered North Star footage, Beckett's ownership claim, and the unexplained package found beyond the fence. Nothing connected the incident strongly enough to charge anyone. Yet, Mara continued, "We contacted Coulter Dane again today. And he denied knowing anything about the food, denied sending anyone to your property, denied caring what you found at North Star. That's a lot of denying for someone who doesn't care." "I noticed." Merrick looked toward Talon. The German shepherd had lifted his head. "Anything else?" "Nothing you can fix tonight." Merrick almost laughed. Mara understood him too well. "Get some sleep," she said. "Unlikely." "Then pretend." The call ended. By 10, the storm worsened. The cabin lights flickered once. Merrick checked the generator. Talon followed him from room to room. Luma watched from beside the puppies. There was no panic in her anymore. Not inside the cabin. That mattered more than Merrick admitted. Near 11:30, he finally lay down. He did not sleep long. A cold nose touched his hand. Merrick's eyes opened. Talon stood beside the bed. No bark, no growl, only stillness. Merrick sat up. "What?" Talon turned toward the door. Merrick pulled on his boots and checked the security monitor. 3 cameras showed snow. The 4th was black. Rear cabin. No signal. Merrick stared at the empty square. The camera had been functioning 20 minutes earlier. His first instinct was immediate. Outside. Identify the problem. Close distance. Control the situation. He stopped. Mara's voice returned in memory. "Do not give them the chance to make you the problem." Merrick crossed the hall instead. He closed the interior gate separating Luma and the puppies from the mudroom and secured the secondary latch. Luma stood. Her copper eyes watched him. "Stay." Talon remained beside Merrick. He called Mara. "Rear camera is down." Her voice sharpened instantly. "Are you inside?" "Yes." "Stay there, I'm coming." Merrick ended the call and switched off the kitchen light. He moved to the side window where he could see the workshop and the edge of the drive without standing in silhouette. Snow destroyed most visibility. Then Talon stiffened. His ears locked forward. Merrick followed the line of his stare. Movement near the workshop. One figure, then another. A flashlight flashed beneath a coat. The first man stepped into the faint porch light. Beckett Rusk. Even through blowing snow, Merrick recognized the thick body, old brown coat, and restless forward lean. The second man was someone Merrick had never seen in person. He did not need an introduction. Coulter Dane was 42, nearly 6'2", and solidly built through the shoulders, with the hard proportions of a man who had spent years around heavy equipment, but now trusted other people to lift most of it. His dark brown hair was cut short beneath a black winter cap. His face was long and clean-shaven, with a narrow nose, square jaw, and pale gray eyes that seemed almost colorless beneath the porch light. Unlike Beckett, Coulter moved with control. His charcoal work jacket was clean, his gloves matched, and even in a storm he carried himself like a man offended by disorder. Merrick understood immediately why Beckett followed him. Beckett looked like someone ruled by his impulses. Coulter looked like someone who had learned to rule other people's. The men reached the workshop. Merrick could not hear every word through the storm, but the argument quickly grew louder. "You said it was in the house," Beckett snapped. "I said he took something from North Star. I came for my dogs." "They're not your dogs if the county freezes the claim." Beckett turned on him. "You said this would be simple." Coulter stepped closer. Even at a distance, Merrick saw Beckett recoil half a step. "Nothing is simple anymore because you couldn't keep one dog behind a fence." Merrick's jaw tightened. So Coulter knew, not everything, but enough. Beckett pointed toward the cabin. "I'm taking Greta and the pups." "No, you're finding out what he has." "I'm done finding things for you." Something shifted between them. Not friendship breaking. More like fear finally becoming heavier than loyalty. Talon moved toward the back door. Merrick placed one hand against the shepherd's shoulder. "Not yet." Headlights appeared far down the county road. Mara. The wash of white light through the trees changed everything. Coulter saw it first. He turned and ran, not toward his vehicle, toward the timberline. Beckett hesitated, then followed. "Beckett!" Merrick shouted from inside. The man looked back. His next step landed beyond the packed edge of the drive. The snow beneath him collapsed. Beckett disappeared. A strangled yell rose from below. Coulter stopped. For 1 second, Merrick expected him to turn. Coulter looked toward the sound, then toward the approaching headlights, and ran. He vanished between the pines. Merrick opened the door. Talon shot out ahead of him but did not chase Coulter. Instead, the German shepherd veered toward the broken edge of the snowbank. That choice made Merrick follow. Talon stopped beside a narrow ravine where a creek ran beneath ice and drifted snow. Beckett lay 15 feet below. One leg was trapped awkwardly beneath him. Snow continued falling into the cut. "Help!" His voice sounded smaller than Merrick had ever heard it. Talon stood at the edge and barked twice. Merrick looked down. This man had neglected Luma, claimed her, tried to take her puppies, come onto Merrick's property in the middle of a storm. Merrick had every reason to despise him. The temperature had dropped below zero. Reason did not change physics. A man left in that ravine could die. Merrick turned toward the pickup. Rehook. As Merrick reached for the rescue strap behind the truck seat, Talon suddenly left the ravine. The dog ran back toward the cabin. For one sharp second, Merrick thought something else had gone wrong. Then Talon stopped at the porch. Luma stood behind the glass door. The two German shepherds looked at one another. Luma's body was rigid. Talon gave one short bark. Luma slowly sat. Only then did Talon turn and race back toward Merrick. Merrick stared at him. There was no mystery in what Talon had done, no supernatural message. He had checked the vulnerable members of his group before returning to the emergency. A working dog's instinct. Simple, practical. Yet Merrick felt something tighten in his throat. Talon had not chosen between protecting the innocent and helping someone who had caused harm. He had found a way to do both. Merrick wished human beings managed that choice as cleanly. Mara's SUV stopped hard at the edge of the drive. She stepped out with a flashlight and emergency kit. What happened? Beckett fell. Coulter ran north. Mara looked toward the trees, then toward the ravine. She made the same decision Merrick had. Beckett first. They anchored the rescue strap to the truck. Mara descended far enough to reach Beckett while Merrick controlled the line above. Beckett's ankle appeared injured, but he was conscious. Talon remained near the edge, tracking every movement below. "Don't leave me," Beckett called. Merrick almost answered. He didn't. He pulled. Pain tore through his right shoulder. For an instant his arm weakened. Mara looked up. "You good?" "Yes." It was a lie, but not an important one. Merrick shifted the load to his left side and continued. They brought Beckett over the edge several minutes later. He lay on the snow, coughing and shaking. Talon approached once, smelled Beckett's coat, and stepped away. No forgiveness, no hostility. Assessment completed. An ambulance from Bright Pine reached the property after the plow opened enough road for passage. Beckett was transported with a badly sprained ankle, mild exposure, and several bruises. Mara went with him. Merrick remained with the dogs until morning. At 10, Mara called. "Beckett wants to talk." Merrick drove to Bright Pine Community Hospital. The building was small, bright, and smelled of disinfectant and burnt coffee. Beckett lay in a room near the emergency wing. Without his coat and anger, he seemed reduced. His face was gray beneath the redness. His sandy hair stuck out in uneven directions, and his stubble looked darker against tired skin. Mara sat beside the window with a recorder on the table. "This is voluntary," she said. Beckett nodded. His eyes stayed on Merrick. "He left me." Merrick knew who he meant. "Yes." Beckett laughed once. It held no humor. "Should have known." Silence stretched. Then Beckett began talking. Calvin Marek had hired him for repairs during the final months of Calvin's illness. When Calvin died, there had been no family nearby. Beckett kept using part of the warehouse property, and Luma stayed. "No one came for her," he said. "So you decided she was yours?" Mara asked. Beckett looked away. "I fed her." "Sometimes," Merrick said. Beckett flinched. He did not argue. The confession came slowly. During periods when he drank heavily, Beckett left Luma alone too long. Food schedules became irregular. Water froze during the coldest weeks. When Luma gave birth to 3 puppies, responsibility became heavier than Beckett wanted. "I thought I had time." Merrick's voice remained flat. "They didn't." Beckett swallowed. The night Luma escaped, the warehouse heating had failed. One water container froze. Food was almost gone. A weakened section of fencing finally gave under Luma's repeated pushing. She left with all 3 puppies. Beckett stared at his hands. "She chose better than I did." Merrick said nothing. Then Mara asked about Coulter. Beckett's entire posture changed. 3 years earlier, Beckett had been riding with Coulter on a Dane timber and hauling truck, Old Lantern Road, the night Elise and Nora died. Merrick felt the room shrink. Beckett spoke carefully now. The truck was carrying material outside the scheduled manifest. Coulter was driving too fast for the icy road. At a bend, the truck crossed the center line. An SUV appeared. Elise Vale was driving. She swerved. The vehicles never made direct contact. Her SUV lost traction. It left the road. Merrick heard nothing after that sentence for several seconds. No hospital sounds. No heating vent. Nothing. Beckett continued. Coulter stopped farther down the road. Beckett wanted to call emergency services. Coulter refused. A report would expose the unauthorized haul and create other problems for the company. They left. Merrick stood perfectly still. So you saw the vehicle go off the road? Beckett nodded. And you left? Another nod. Merrick's hands closed. Mara saw. She did not move. She did not need to. Merrick looked at Beckett for a long time. 3 years of grief had once imagined monsters. Reality had given him something smaller. 2 frightened, selfish men making one cowardly decision after another. Merrick could have hit him. Part of him wanted to. Instead, he looked at Mara. Record everything. I am. Beckett began crying quietly. Merrick felt no satisfaction. No forgiveness either. Only truth. And truth, he realized, did not always bring peace when it arrived. Sometimes it simply removed the lie. Mara's phone rang before Merrick left the hospital. She answered, listened. Her expression hardened. What time? A pause. Understood. She lowered the phone. Merrick knew before she spoke that something had changed. Coulter's house is empty. Vehicle? Truck is there. Mara reached for her coat. His snowmobile isn't. Outside the hospital windows, snow had begun falling again. Not lightly. The next front was already moving over Bright Pine. Mara looked toward the white sky. If he went north, we don't have much time. Merrick thought of the roads beyond town, old timber routes, frozen creeks, miles of forest, and a storm large enough to erase a man before morning. By dawn, the storm had narrowed Bright Pine into a handful of roads, radio calls and headlights moving through white. Sheriff Owen Mercer organized the search from a county maintenance garage near the north edge of town. Owen was 52, broad through the chest and slightly heavy around the waist, with close-cut iron-gray hair, a square weathered face, and a trimmed gray mustache that made him look sterner than he actually was. He had spent 26 years in law enforcement, most of them in rural Minnesota, and had developed the habit of speaking slowly when everyone around him wanted to hurry. 2 decades earlier, Owen had lost a younger brother during a winter hunting accident. Since then, he treated bad weather as an adversary that punished pride faster than weakness. A large county map covered the garage wall. Old logging roads were marked in red pencil, snowmobile routes in blue. Areas already checked had been crossed out. Merrick Vale stood beneath a fluorescent light with Talon beside his left leg. Mara Bellamy approached carrying a handheld radio and stopped directly in front of him. You are not going alone. I didn't say I was. You were thinking it loudly. Merrick looked at the map. Coulter Dane had disappeared sometime the previous night with a snowmobile. His truck remained at his house, along with most of his clothing and several personal items. That suggested haste rather than a planned disappearance. The temperature was falling again. Whatever legal consequences waited for Coulter no longer mattered if winter reached him first. Mara pointed at Merrick. You participate as civilian search support. You follow Owen's directions. Talon works only where we tell you. No separating from the team. Merrick's expression remained unreadable. I know search procedure. I know exactly why you know search procedure. Mara held his gaze. That is why I'm saying it twice. Behind them, Harriet Sloan stood beside the map wearing her brown wool coat and heavy boots. Harriet had been called because she remembered the old North Star training routes better than anyone still living nearby. She traced one gloved finger north of Old Lantern Road. Luma trained through here. The route crossed dense timber before joining several abandoned haul trails. North Star used these elevations because wind changed quickly between the ridges, Harriet explained. Dogs had to learn not to depend on one scent direction. Owen studied the map. Anything useful for Dane? Harriet nodded toward an old track farther north. There used to be a logging cabin near Birchcut. Dane's company hauled through there years ago. Merrick looked at Mara. That gives him shelter. If he reached it, Mara replied. At Lantern Ridge Cabin, Luma remained with Moss, Poppy, and Rune under Alohan's supervision. Merrick had considered taking Luma. Harriet had stopped him. She's tired, underweight, and nursing 3 puppies. Whatever training she remembers, she has already done enough. Talon was different. 7 years old, experienced, healthy, and accustomed to following Merrick through difficult terrain. Merrick crouched beside him. Talon's black and gold coat was protected by a winter working harness. His amber eyes remained alert, ears moving toward every radio sound and opening door. "This is work," Merrick said quietly. Talon stared at him. No wagging tail, no excitement. He understood tone, if not language. The search convoy moved out shortly after 7. Snowplows opened the first mile. After that came tracked utility vehicles and snowmobiles. Merrick rode with Mara until they reached the old North Star station. The clearing looked smaller in daylight. The ruined shelter leaned beneath fresh snow. Training posts emerged like dark bones from the drifts. The team split into controlled sectors. Within 15 minutes, one deputy found a snowmobile track beneath the newer snowfall. The trail angled north. Owen raised a hand. Everyone stopped. The team photographed the track, marked the position, and continued. Merrick said nothing. This was not a chase. It was a search. That distinction mattered. The trail climbed gradually through timber. Twice the tracks disappeared where wind had filled them. Talon worked near Merrick, nose moving low over the snow. At one junction, 3 old logging routes separated. The visible snowmobile marks were almost gone. A deputy pointed left. "Looks deeper there." Merrick did not answer. Talon crossed the intersection once, then again. He stopped at the center route. His nose worked along the edge of a wind-packed ridge. Then Talon looked back at Merrick. Merrick checked the surface. A shallow compression ran between 2 drifts. Not enough for certainty. "Possible track," he said. Owen came forward. They inspected it together. The team chose the center route, not because Talon possessed some mysterious knowledge, because trained noses could detect traces humans missed. An hour later, they found the snowmobile. It lay on its side below a wooded slope. One ski was broken. The front cowling had cracked against a young pine. Mara descended carefully. No rider. Blood did not mark the snow. That was good. Footprints did. A single set led away from the wreck. Coulter had survived the crash and continued on foot. Merrick stared into the forest. He imagined Coulter limping through it. A man who had once watched another vehicle leave a winter road and decided his own future mattered more than the people inside. Now winter had placed him on the opposite side of that decision. Merrick did not enjoy the symmetry. He feared that some part of him might. Rehooked Talon followed the footprints for nearly half a mile before stopping beside a cedar tree. Merrick expected him to continue. Instead, Talon lowered his nose to the snow and began digging. "Track is forward," one deputy said. Merrick watched. Talon scraped twice more. Something dark appeared beneath the powder. A glove. Coulter's. Mara picked it up with a gloved hand. Inside, the lining was damp, fresh enough to matter. But Talon did something stranger. He smelled the glove once, then turned away from the obvious footprints and stared downhill toward a dense patch of fallen timber. Merrick studied the snow. The visible prints continued forward for 20 yards, then became shallow, too regular. He understood. He walked forward, then doubled back. Mara followed his gaze. Why? To hide his direction. Talon moved downhill. Merrick felt no sense of magic, only respect. People lied with words. Sometimes they even lied with footprints. Talon did not care about either. He followed what remained true. The descent became steeper. The search team moved slowly. Coulter's real trail appeared intermittently where branches had sheltered the snow from wind. One boot dragged slightly. He was injured. That increased urgency. Radio reports came from the other teams. Nothing. Another half-mile brought them to the remains of an old logging trail. Harriet's memory had been right. Birchcut. The cabin appeared through the trees shortly afterward. Its roof had partially collapsed. The door stood open. Inside, they found signs that someone had been there. A discarded food wrapper. Snow melted near an old stove that no longer worked. A smear of dirt on a bench. But Coulter was gone. "He tried shelter," Mara said. "Couldn't stay warm," Merrick replied. Outside, Talon moved toward the back of the cabin. He found another trail. They followed. The wind increased. Merrick's right shoulder had begun to ache, but he ignored it. The terrain became chaotic. Fallen spruce, exposed rock, deep pockets of snow. Then Talon stopped. His body went rigid. Merrick heard it a second later. A voice. Weak. "Here." Mara raised one arm. The team spread carefully through the fallen timber. Coulter lay between two broken spruce trunks. His left leg was trapped beneath a heavy branch. Snow covered half his charcoal jacket. His face, usually controlled and precise, had turned pale beneath the cold. His dark hair was wet against his forehead, and the confidence Merrick had seen outside Lantern Ridge cabin was gone. Coulter saw him. Something moved across his gray eyes. Fear, then shame. Merrick. Hearing his own name from that man did something violent inside him. For 3 years, Merrick had imagined the missing piece of the accident as weather. Bad luck. An unknowable mistake. Now that missing piece had a face. A man. A decision. Elise had been alive when Coulter drove away. Nora had been alive. Merrick remembered darkness inside the overturned vehicle. His own breath. Nora calling. The sound weakened with every minute. His hands curled. Coulter looked at him. "You know." Merrick did not answer. Mara moved toward the branch. "We need to get this off him." Merrick remained still. He could let the others work. No one would blame him. He could step backward. He could turn away. The temperature did not care about justice. Coulter's lips were already losing color. Talon stood beside Merrick. The German shepherd did not growl, did not bare his teeth, did not look at Coulter with hatred because hatred required a story Talon did not possess. Talon simply waited, ready for instruction. Merrick looked down at him, then at Coulter. 3 years ago, Coulter had faced a choice beside a wrecked vehicle: help strangers or protect himself. He had chosen himself. Merrick suddenly understood that if he allowed Coulter's decision to determine his own, then Coulter would take something else from him. Not Elise, not Nora, something still alive. Merrick stepped forward. "Get the lifting straps." Mara looked at him once, then nodded. They stabilized the branch before raising it. Merrick knelt beside Coulter and checked circulation below the trapped leg. Coulter winced. "Don't move." The words came naturally, not kindness, procedure. The team lifted. Merrick pulled Coulter clear with Mara. Pain tore through Merrick's shoulder, but he maintained his grip until Coulter was on the rescue blanket. Talon remained close. Coulter looked up at Merrick. "Why?" Merrick tightened one strap around the blanket. "Because I'm not you." No one spoke after that. They carried Coulter to the nearest extraction route. By late afternoon, a tracked rescue vehicle had him headed toward Bright Pine. Merrick stood beneath falling snow and watched it disappear. He did not feel victorious. He felt tired, but lighter in a place he had not realized was still carrying weight. The investigation moved quickly after Coulter was stable enough to be questioned. Beckett's recorded statement was compared with the North Star footage. County records confirmed the truck route. Dane Timber and Hauling logs showed missing entries from the night of the accident. Business records contradicted portions of Coulter's original statement. None of the pieces stood alone. Together they formed a coherent timeline. The old accident file was officially reopened. Coulter faced investigation for leaving the scene, failing to report the crash circumstances he had witnessed, and matters connected to the concealed haul. Beckett faced separate legal consequences involving his treatment and possession of Luma, along with his actions at Lantern Ridge cabin. Merrick asked Mara only one question. "Are they going to answer for what they did?" Mara considered the wording. "They're going to answer to the system. I won't promise you what a court will decide." That answer satisfied Merrick more than a promise would have. He had spent enough time around lies dressed as certainty. Several days later, Mara came to Lantern Ridge cabin carrying another folder. Luma was lying beside Talon near the stove. Moss slept on his back. Poppy had claimed Merrick's boot as a pillow. Rune was attempting to steal the lace from the other one. Mara sat at the kitchen table. Beckett's ownership claim failed. Merrick stopped moving. The North Star records established Luma's identity. Calvin's records established lawful custody after the program closed. There is no documentation transferring her from Calvin to Beckett. Merrick looked at Luma. So what happens? The remaining estate and county process have to finish. After that, she can be legally placed. Mara opened the folder. You filed an application? Yes. Mara's mouth moved slightly, almost a smile. For Luma? Yes. She looked toward the puppies, then back at Merrick. Luma or all four? Merrick followed her gaze. Moss shifted in his sleep. Poppy's nose twitched. Rune finally succeeded in pulling the bootlace loose and looked deeply pleased with himself. Talon watched the entire disaster without intervention. Merrick had spent 3 years removing anything from his life that might hurt to lose. Now 4 animals had arrived, and somehow the hardest question was no longer whether he could love them. It was whether loving them meant keeping them. I don't know, he said. Mara closed the folder. For once, she did not ask him to decide. Outside, sunlight broke through thinning clouds and touched the snow along Lantern Ridge. Winter was still there. But for the first time, Merrick could see the beginning of its end. Winter did not leave Bright Pine all at once. It loosened its grip slowly. Icicles shortened beneath the eaves. Snowbanks sank from shoulder height to knee height. Dark earth appeared around the trunks of the white pines, and thin ribbons of water began running beneath the ice along the county roads. Ashglass Lake remained frozen, but sunlight had changed. It no longer looked cold. It looked bright. The Winter Lantern Festival had been delayed twice because of the storms. When Bright Pine finally held it in early March, the town seemed determined to make up for every canceled school day and every night spent listening to wind strike the windows. Golden lights hung from the storefronts surrounding the square. Paper lanterns swung from wooden posts. Children chased one another between snowbanks while adults carried coffee, cider, and plates of food beneath strings of warm bulbs. Ashglass Lake reflected the lights in long amber streaks, as if 1,000 candles had been trapped beneath the ice. Merrick Vale stood at the edge of the crowd and nearly turned around. Talon stood on his left. Luma stood on his right. For 3 years, Merrick had avoided gatherings like this. Too many voices, too many families, too many fathers lifting children onto shoulders, too many reminders of the shape his own life had once taken. At 55, Merrick still looked capable of walking through almost anything. His broad shoulders filled the fitted green camouflage shirt beneath his winter layer, his silvering undercut remained clean and precise, and his angular, clean-shaven face gave strangers the impression of confidence. But Talon knew better. The 7-year-old German shepherd leaned lightly against Merrick's leg. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for Merrick. I know, Merrick murmured. Luma looked up. Then Merrick stepped into the square. Elowen Hart waved from beside one of the lantern booths. Rune was with her. The sable-gray puppy had grown rapidly over the previous weeks. His paws were still too large for his body, and one ear stood more reliably than the other, but the fragile uncertainty of the storm night was disappearing. Rune trotted beside Elowen with the confidence of an animal already convinced that every public event existed primarily for his investigation. Elowen had officially applied to adopt him. She planned to begin simple scent games once Rune was old enough, then gradually introduce structured search work if his temperament continued to suit it. Merrick suspected Talon had already started training him without permission. Rune sat whenever Talon sat, stopped when Talon stopped, and had recently begun staring at closed doors as though expecting a mission on the other side. "Look who decided civilization remains tolerable," Elowen said. "Temporary assessment." "Of course." Merrick noticed Moss nearby. The sturdy black and gold puppy walked beside Elias Boone, a 29-year-old state park ranger stationed near the Northern Trail System. Elias was tall and lean, with sun-browned skin, short reddish-brown hair, a narrow face, and a neatly trimmed beard that made him look older than his age. He had quiet hazel eyes and the patient manner of someone accustomed to explaining rules to tourists who believed frozen lakes respected confidence. Elias had lost his first shepherd to cancer 2 years earlier. He had not applied for another dog until meeting Moss. The match had been obvious. Moss respected boundaries, watched everything, and preferred moving to sitting still. Elias needed a dog who would spend more time outdoors than beside a couch. Moss needed someone who would never mistake vigilance for aggression. At the opposite side of the square sat Maeve Hollister. Maeve was 67, a widow with a small, rounded frame, pale freckled skin, and silver-white hair cut in a soft bob beneath a dark plum-knitted hat. Her blue eyes had the patient sadness of someone who had learned that grief could become part of a face without destroying its kindness. Maeve's husband had died 8 years earlier. The old German shepherd who had helped her through those years had died the previous spring. For months, Maeve had refused to adopt again. Then she met Poppy. Poppy was curled in Maeve's arms now, pale gold fur spilling over the older woman's coat. The match had not begun that way. When Maeve first visited Lantern Ridge Cabin, she had not touched Poppy. She had sat on the floor nearly an hour. No calling, no reaching, no baby talk. Poppy watched from beneath a chair. Maeve simply waited. Eventually the little shepherd walked across the room, smelled Maeve's hands, climbed into her lap, and fell asleep. Merrick had watched the entire thing without speaking. Something about it had unsettled him. Perhaps because patience looked so much like love when no one was trying to possess anything. The adoption process had taken weeks. Eloan checked veterinary histories and household conditions. Mara helped review records and local requirements. Merrick visited homes. He inspected fencing, asked about schedules, emergency plans, exercise. He probably asked too many questions. Mara told him so. Merrick did not apologize. One evening, Mara finally asked what he was afraid of. He had looked through the glass door at the puppies sleeping in a pile. Choosing wrong. Mara had nodded. That's different from letting go. Merrick had understood the distinction. He simply had not liked it. For weeks, part of him believed keeping all 3 puppies would prove how deeply he cared for them. Then he realized something uncomfortable. He was not imagining their happiness. He was imagining his own fear when the house became quiet again. That was not the same thing. Love could protect. Love could also release. The festival gave Merrick his first glimpse of what that choice might look like. Moss walked confidently beside Elias. Poppy slept against Maeve. Rune followed Eloan, occasionally checking where Talon stood. Every puppy was safe. Every puppy was loved. And none of them needed Merrick to own them for his rescue to matter. Rehook. Near the frozen lake, a child dropped a paper lantern. The lantern rolled across the packed snow before coming to rest near Luma. Luma approached it. The little flame inside flickered behind the paper. For a moment, Merrick expected her to sniff it and move away. Instead, Luma sat. Poppy lifted her head from Maeve's arms. Moss stopped beside Elias. Rune turned away from Eloan. All 3 puppies looked toward their mother. Luma looked back at them. Nothing dramatic happened. No barking, no running, no mysterious signal. Only 4 dogs separated by new people and new distances, holding one another in sight. Then Luma lowered her head. Moss continued walking. Poppy relaxed against Maeve. Rune returned to Eloan. Merrick felt a pressure behind his eyes. He understood then that departure was not always abandonment. Sometimes leaving meant the place behind you had done its job. The first adoption became final 3 days later. Moss left with Elias. Luma walked around the room several times after the truck disappeared. She checked the door, then the window, then Moss's empty sleeping spot. Merrick remained nearby without interfering. Eventually, Luma lay beside Talon. Poppy left the following week. Maeve brought a soft blanket from home and placed it on the floor before attaching the leash. Poppy climbed onto it immediately. Luma stood at the doorway long after Maeve's car disappeared. That night, Merrick found her sleeping with her nose against Talon's shoulder. Rune was last. Eloan arrived one bright morning with a new collar and the expression of someone pretending the decision had been entirely rational. Rune ran directly to her. Before leaving, Rune returned to Luma. Luma smelled his face carefully. Then she touched her nose to his muzzle. Rune tried to lick her ear. Luma turned away with maternal dignity. He followed Elowen out. 3 puppies had gone. The cabin was quieter. Not empty. Talon remained. Luma remained. And several days later, a county letter arrived. Merrick's adoption of Luma had been approved. He read the letter twice. Then he looked at her. "You're staying." Luma walked toward him. She pressed her forehead briefly against his thigh. Talon watched from the rug. Merrick glanced at him. "Don't look smug." Talon looked exceptionally smug. By late March, Merrick had begun clearing the detached workshop. He did not build a rescue center. Bright Pine already had shelters and foster networks. What the region lacked was a temporary winter holding space for animals found after hours or during storms when transport could not immediately reach them. Merrick converted part of the workshop into 3 secure indoor kennels. Elowen helped plan washable flooring, ventilation, feeding storage, and a basic examination area. Mara helped him understand the county permits. Harriet arrived one afternoon with old North Star crates, blankets, leashes, and 2 stainless steel water stations. People in Bright Pine heard about the project. Donations appeared. Food, towels, old quilts. A carpenter repaired a damaged door. Someone left a box of dog toys without a name. Merrick stood in the middle of the finished room one evening. A wooden sign waited against the wall. He had carved the letters himself. Nora's Lantern. He ran one hand over the name. Not a memorial. Not exactly. He had spent 3 years treating Nora's memory as something fragile, something that must be preserved behind glass, because allowing life near it might somehow diminish it. Now her name hung above a door meant to open. That felt different. That felt right. Healing did not arrive cleanly afterward. Some nights Merrick still woke before dawn. His shoulder still burned when cold fronts moved through. Certain songs hurt. Certain roads hurt. Sometimes he reached for 2 coffee cups before remembering there was no reason to. The difference was that pain no longer decided the entire day. One cold morning near the end of March, Merrick drove to the cemetery alone. Elise and Nora rested beneath a maple tree overlooking the southern edge of town. Snow still covered most of the ground. Merrick sat on a bench. For a while he said nothing. Then he told them about Moss, about Maeve and Poppy, about Rune trying to learn everything Talon did, about Luma stealing Talon's sleeping spot and Talon pretending not to care. He told Nora about the sign. "I used your name," he said. His voice nearly failed. "Hope that's all right." Wind moved softly through bare branches. Merrick did not ask forgiveness for surviving. That was new. "I miss you." He looked at Elise's name. "Both of you." Then he breathed. "I'm learning how to stay." On the drive home, Talon sat in the passenger seat and Luma rode behind him. The truck approached Old Lantern Road. Merrick automatically slowed. Luma stood. She looked through the window. The road was different now. Sunlight touched the pines. Meltwater darkened the edges of the pavement. Nothing waited there. No hidden evidence. No unanswered question. Luma watched for several seconds. Then she sat. Talon rested his head against the seat. Merrick continued driving. At last, the meaning of that first night seemed simple. Luma had never been sent to him. She had not known his grief. She had not understood Nora or Elise. She had been a frightened mother following memory toward a place that had once meant safety. Talon had recognized a dog that needed help. Merrick had chosen to stop. Perhaps destiny did not require miracles. Perhaps sometimes it was only the moment when one wounded life crossed another and neither continued alone. Spring arrived quietly. One morning, sunlight poured through the pines surrounding Lantern Ridge cabin. Snow melted from the roof in steady drops. Talon lay on the porch. Luma rested beside him. A vehicle turned into the drive. The logo of a local rescue organization was printed on the door. Inside was an elderly male German shepherd, perhaps 9 years old, with a faded black and tan coat, a gray muzzle, tired brown eyes, and the cautious posture of a dog who had recently been found wandering near a county road. Merrick stepped outside. The rescue volunteer explained that weather and transport schedules had left them needing a safe place for one night. Merrick looked toward the workshop. The sign above the door caught the morning light. Nora's lantern. Talon stood. Luma rose beside him. Merrick opened the door. "All right." He looked at both dogs. "We've got work again." Talon stepped off the porch first. Luma followed. Merrick walked behind them toward the waiting shepherd. No one hurried. No one needed to. Winter was ending, and this time, no one would have to walk through it alone. Sometimes the miracles God sends into our lives do not arrive with thunder, bright lights, or answers we immediately understand. Sometimes they arrive quietly. They come as a dog waiting beside a lonely man, a frightened mother leading her puppies through the snow, a stranger who needs help at exactly the moment we believe we have nothing left to give. Sometimes a miracle is simply a reason to open a door we have kept closed for far too long. Merrick believed surviving meant he had been sentenced to remember what he lost. For years, he carried the deaths of Elise and Nora like a debt he could never repay. He thought that if he allowed himself to laugh again, to love again, or to build a new life, he would somehow be leaving them behind. But love does not ask us to stop living in order to prove that someone mattered. Perhaps God does not always remove the winter from our path. Sometimes He gives us the strength to walk through it. Sometimes He places another living soul beside us so that neither of us has to cross the storm alone. Luma did not know Merrick's story when she wandered through that snow with her 3 puppies. Talon could not explain why he refused to let Merrick keep driving. There was no thunder from heaven telling Merrick what to do. There was only a choice: stop or keep going, open the door or remain closed, protect another life or protect his heart from ever being needed again. And perhaps that is where many of life's quiet miracles begin. Not when everything suddenly becomes easy, but when we choose kindness even while we are still hurting. Merrick could not change what happened to his family. He could not undo the cowardice of the men who left them on that winter road, but he could decide what kind of man would walk away from that truth. He chose not to become bitter. He chose not to become cruel. He chose to save even someone he had every reason to hate. That did not erase justice, and it did not mean forgiveness had to come quickly. It simply meant that another person's worst decision would not be allowed to decide the condition of Merrick's soul. That lesson belongs far beyond this story. Every day, people carry losses that others cannot see. An empty chair at the dinner table, a phone number they can no longer call, a child who moved away, a marriage that ended, a friend who never came home, a beloved animal whose footsteps are no longer heard in the hallway. Grief can convince us that closing our hearts is the safest way to survive. But a closed heart cannot be broken again only because it is no longer allowing much life inside. Sometimes healing begins with something very small: answering a phone call, checking on a neighbor, feeding a hungry animal, sitting beside someone who has nothing to say, giving one more chance, opening one more door. We may never know which ordinary act of kindness God will use to change another life, or our own. Merrick thought he had rescued 4 dogs from a winter storm. In the end, those dogs reminded him that his life was still capable of giving shelter, receiving love, and carrying light forward. Maybe that was the miracle. Not that his pain disappeared, but that pain was no longer the only thing growing inside him. If this story reminded you of someone who once helped you through a difficult season, share it with them today. If you have ever experienced a moment when an animal, a stranger, or an unexpected act of kindness arrived at exactly the right time, tell us about it in the comments. Your story may be the encouragement someone else needs tonight. And if you believe stories of loyalty, courage, faith, and second chances still matter, subscribe to the channel and join us for the next one. May God bless you and the people you love. May He protect your home, give you strength in the winters you cannot avoid, comfort you in the losses you cannot change, and place good hearts beside you when the road becomes difficult. And when someone lost appears along your path, may God give you the wisdom to recognize that sometimes the life you stop to save may become part of the miracle that saves you too.